I have, yep, just a few. Mostly, I think most of the ones you've done with Buck are the ones I've listened to so far. So,
Oh, okay.
Cool. Yeah, we're getting slightly better at this all the time, it seems like. But one thing we learned early on is like, just go ahead and hit the record button. Because like you see someone and then you start talking to them and then they tell you like a crazy story about the day or whatever.
right,
And you're
right,
15 minutes into it and like, okay, well now I guess we're going to start talking.
yep,
And sometimes those are the best stories. It's funny how that works. The best stories are like in the very beginning. And then
mm-hmm.
it's like, okay, conversation's winding down. You hit click. And then just like, okay, I think we're good now. And the person's like, oh, by the way, have you heard about blah, blah, blah? And,
Right.
so we're figuring that out more and more. But yeah. So what you said you were like weaning calves yesterday, or what were you doing?
No, we were just preconditioning a bunch.
Okay.
So get ready to ship. We ship on Thursday, day after tomorrow. And anyway, yeah, just kind of getting all our crap put together and make sure we're ready to go. So,
Yeah. Understood.
yep.
Understood. And are y'all you're somewhere like Colorado or
No,
Wyoming area?
I'm Western Wyoming. I'm
Okay.
just 20 miles from the Idaho border, and where our
Oh,
cows run actually is we're in Idaho all the time, every day. We was in Idaho today for a little bit, so yeah, we're real close to the border.
Okay. Cool.
Yep.
And who is we on this whole outfit?
So just my dad and I. We're not a big outfit. We run around 300 head, just cow calf pairs, Angus, Sim Angus cross. We'll throw a few Hereford bulls in every few years to get some black bollies and that. But yeah, that's what we do.
Awesome. That's cool.
So
Yeah, I think right off the bat, so people realize how cool Skye is. I mean, if anyone doesn't follow you, they should go over to Instagram and follow you and look at your page, because I just looked at that before I came up here. Your most recent reel that you posted there, and you guys are catching. So are those bighorn sheep? What were you guys catching out of helicopters?
Yep, out of a helicopter. So my brother actually does it kind of full time in the fall and winter. And he got started. He's been doing this for, I don't know how long, maybe 10 years, maybe even a hair more. But he was working with a private company, and they go around and they work like with the Fish and Wildlife Service, Game and Fish, whatever. And they get hired to do everything from like collaring wolves, to be able to track them, or anyway, he does everything with like wild game. And a couple of years ago, I said, hey, I want to go with you. I want to just take some pictures of you doing your thing. And so anyway, I went with him, and he said, yeah, you'll just take pictures and whatever. And hell, the very first sheep, so I don't even know what we're doing or what's going on. And we're flying up there in this helicopter. They take all the doors off, and all of a sudden, he has a net gun. I think they use like a 308 cartridge to shoot a net out of this cone deal. And it falls over the sheep, and then somebody has to basically get out and mug it, just like you do cows. And hell, I'm sitting there in the back just taking pictures, and pretty quick he bellers at me. He said, Skye, get your ass out and get that sheep. So I don't even know he said, just hold it down until we get back. So I jump out, and I'm holding a sheep. And then pretty quick he went and netted another one and come back, and he kind of showed me how to hobble them and do their thing. And what they were doing in that situation was they were live trapping them to relocate them to a different area to kind of build a population up. And that was up in Montana. So anyway, long story short, it was fun. Never thought nothing of it. Well, about a year later, another guy, and I shared some of my pictures in that on Facebook of that. Anyway, long story short, so this other guy calls me. He's over here kind of where I'm at. And he says, hey, I've got this sheep catching deal where you've already done it. Do you want to go? I said, well, hell yeah, let's go. So anyway, I got to go and do that. And hopefully that's going to be every winter type thing. So, and for this deal, what they were doing is the Game and Fish were studying. They're starting to get like pneumonia in them a little bit. And so they live capture them, haul them down to the biologist. So you live capture them, put them in a bag, hook them to the helicopter flies them, down to the flat where the biologists are, and then they do a little bit of blood work, collar them, do whatever they have to do. As soon as they're done, chopper picks them back up and brings them right where you caught them, or real close to the area, and drop them off and let them go. So that's kind of what we were doing in that deal.
Wow. Yeah, that was my first thought when I watched that reel. I was like, boy, it seems like a deal like this, it's all hands on deck. So how is she able to film this while all that's going on? Clearly you've got that figured out, and I'm glad you do. It's super cool, but how do you pull that off?
Well, a little bit of a GoPro. Those are helpful. You can, glue one to your helmet and whatever. And then a lot of it is just when you get your work done, I just do it with my phone. I have my phone handy in a pocket or something. And as soon as I'm done hobbling or bagging or, whatever, like the chopper taking off and all that was all just with my phone. So nothing too fancy.
Yeah, it was funny. I can't remember who I was talking to, but I was like, yeah, I got to do another podcast tonight. And I was like, they asked, who are you interviewing now? And I was like, well, I doubt she would say this, but like, she's kind of like an influencer. And they're like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, just let me show you her Instagram. And it's just like that she's doing this crazy thing and this crazy thing. And like, obviously the sheep are a big draw for everybody.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So I don't know like what she would say she does for a living, but it seems like she's just, out there doing all this crazy stuff all the time. And that was like, I knew who you were prior to like the sheep pictures and stuff, but that was the first time, like, cause if you ever scrolled on Instagram, you can get kind of lost in the like, oh, this person's doing something ranchy, this person's doing something ranchy,
right.
And they go on and on to, whatever level. But like, that was something that really stood out to me. I was like, oh no, she's out there doing something that maybe only a handful of people do.
Yeah, no, it was.
So that's awesome.
Cool, and yeah, it's a way cool experience, and I'm very thankful and fortunate to know the people who know the people, basically. So,
yeah,
yeah.
So, in light of that, because kind of like what Joe said, maybe you wouldn't call yourself that. I don't know if you would or you wouldn't, but either way, you have quite a following, and it's kind of cool that you share your lifestyle, like what you do every day. And I know, like Joe said, there is a lot of everyone's gunning for the ranchiest stuff on the internet, but your stuff is real. And obviously I even know a few people that know, I think, your family and stuff. And like, you guys are legit, obviously. How did that come about that you ended up being, if we're going to call it an influencer, either way, having a following and getting to showcase your life on that scale? How did that come about?
Everybody asks me that, and I'm not trying to like be secretive or anything, but I don't know. So I guess what I really started using social media for is I wanted to start taking pictures of just family at brandings or whatever we were doing, just to document it, because I love looking through our old family pictures. And I thought, you know what? I don't have anything like this. We don't really have a lot now that we're older. We have a lot from when we were little kids. I thought, I want to take a bunch and document this time, just of us. And that's why I started photography. It wasn't like to make money at it or do anything like that. And, I started on Facebook, just sharing my pictures. I mean, there was nothing special about it. I'm not great at it. I enjoy it, and I like trying new things, but I started doing that. And then Instagram kind of fired up, and I was late to Instagram. I thought, well, I don't need to share on another deal, And I started on Instagram, and the same thing. All I did was just post pictures that I like or that mean something to me. And I started doing that, and then, it gradually snowballed. It was really slow for, I don't know, the first several years, 3, 4, 5 years. I don't even know if I had 1,000 followers, but I don't do it for numbers. I could care less. I'm glad people enjoy it and they get something out of it. That's great. But to me, numbers, they don't mean nothing. I still, to this day, just post or write, what's on my mind or what I want to just share with the world, or just like you guys said, I want to be real and authentic and just show people what's real. I mean, there's so much fake and so much setup in that on social media that I thought, nah, we need to get back to just being, I don't know, real. So that's what I post, and for some reason people like it, you know. And like I said, there's nothing special about me, and I'm not the handiest or the punchiest or the ranchiest or anything like that. I don't know. I just post stuff and people seem to like it, but I don't have a strategy. I honestly don't know. It just happened.
Well, document's a good word, because that is what it feels like. It's like you're documenting your little part of the West. And I think that's really cool. And it does show that it's stuff that you love. I love your hunting photos, or like the pack trips. And you can tell that you really love that country.
Yeah, I do. And that's I'm glad that comes through, because I do. I love it and I appreciate it, and I don't take it for granted. You know, I know that we don't make a lot of money doing what we do, but there's so much more to life than money, and obviously you have to have a little to keep doing it. But I just want to show people that, yeah, we're here and this is where we grew up, but I do not take it for granted. And I know there's a lot of people who aren't able to see what we do. And so I think if I can show somebody that and make their day a little better, that's awesome too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great attitude.
So, you know, like you said, there's a lot more to life, and especially the lifestyle you live. You can be really rich without kind of getting a lot of monetary value out of it. But one question I do have, and again, I realize this is not why you got into it, but was it wild the first time someone approached you about, because it looks like you have at least a couple sponsorships or like a post where you kind of highlight a product or something. Mm-hmm. You know, we're in the podcast game now, and we have had some sponsors and stuff, but I remember that was kind of like surreal to me in the beginning when that, like, the proposition of that even came about. Cause this podcast was kind of the same way. Like, Ben and I started it because we just wanted to talk about stuff and get to talk to cool people. And that's by far been the best part of it, is all the people we get to talk to. Right. You know, it's not really a money thing, but what was that like, you know, when you finally did maybe get over a hump to where someone found you and were like, oh, like, yeah, we want you to advertise this for us. And how'd you go about dealing with that?
So one thing that I've always stuck to my guns on was I will not advertise anything that I don't actually believe in and use. So I did get approached by, you know, this and that and the other. And if it wasn't something that, like jewelry or something like that, I don't wear jewelry, you know, it's not me. I've turned a lot of people away, but like the Hoffman boots, my, you know, buckaroo gear, all my leggings, my chaps, my hats, stuff that I legit use. That's the type of people that that I work with and that have approached me. But to answer your question, I do remember the first time. Oh, who the heck was it? Maybe Big Frig, maybe Brock from Big Frig. And it's kind of an off deal of Yeti, you know, a different type of a brand. But anyway, I just thought, dang, that's really cool. And that's something that I use all the time. You know, I'm always packing my water and whatnot. And I like stainless steel. And so that was really cool. Why would they want this Wyoming girl? I mean, I'm nobody. But anyway, I remember just being very thankful and thinking, wow, this is awesome. And it kind of just grew. And a lot of times what I do, like I said, like with my boots, my Hoffman boots, we've worn them for, you know, over 20 years. And I legit believe in them and love them and use them every day. And so people would ask me, hey, you're out riding, you know, you're doing this, you're in the cold all the time. What do you wear in the winter? And I'd start telling people just in a private message. And then I thought, man, this is getting old. I was answering hundreds of messages a day, it seemed like. And I thought, I'll just do a post about it. I'll just tell people this is. So anyway, in that regard, I was just telling people I wear Hoffman boots, always have. I'm not sponsored by them. I don't, get anything out of this. I just like them. This is what I use. And then I'd start like just tagging their page just so that it would make it easier for people to go find them. And then when they seen that after a while, they'd reach out to me and say, hey, what about, let's do a trade type thing. We'll send you a pair of boots, just get us some pictures, some content, whatever. So it kind of started like that. And that's with everything that I do advertise, I guess. Like I said, so it helps me because I legit use this stuff, and it also helps me with my photography here more recently. I'm getting a little bit more into like commercial and branding and whatnot. And so in the past, that's given me an opportunity to kind of get a little bit more product commercial work to help build a portfolio. But at the same time, I really want to make sure it helps those brands because I believe in them. It's stuff that I like, and I want them to grow as well. And I really love supporting like smaller companies. Just the good old boys out there trying to make it like we all are. That's kind of my thing. So anybody, small business, I really love to support, and I want to see them do well and grow.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, in a way, I mean, folks like you are now part of the economy in a way that, people have seen kind of behind the curtain of large advertisement firms. They're like, yeah, anybody can make an ad. So when it comes from somebody who's real and they trust, and they don't know you personally, but they feel like they know you or other people we know of. I think that's actually a really great service. Heck, I've bought a lot of stuff. I wasn't born into the cowboy world. And so you start looking around, looking for resources. And so the most, people catch your eye and you start looking at what they wear, what they use, and it's super helpful. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and in a way, you've built like your brand too, right? You've built the Skye Clark brand, which is important because, not necessarily every brand is like this, but like you just said, you're trying to be authentic, you're trying to be honest. And so, for a lot of people out there who, if that comes through to them, you endorsing something like it means a lot to them, and there's something to be said for that you have that ability now. It speaks volumes to you, kind of what I would consider like kind of doing it the right way, right? Because I mean, there are people out there who like they say, "Oh, I'm going to get on social media, I'm going to become a personality, and then I'm going to sell stuff." And I mean, I guess if that's like how you pay the bills, and that's maybe you look at it as a job, and that's different. Right. That's fine. But I think it's very admirable how you've done it, and the fact that you have companies approaching you, and like you said, you can kind of pass judgment on that is me, that isn't me. That says a lot, because there's a lot of people out there who they just need to get the next sponsor because they need to get the next paycheck.
Right.
Skye, something that I want to ask you, and it's kind of along the same lines of what we're talking about, is it's kind of, I'm curious because I don't know. Like Joe and I both live in I would say we live in kind of urban environments. I'm in Georgia. He's in Virginia. He lives right outside of Blacksburg. I'm near Macon. The ranch here, you feel like you don't have neighbors, but I know there's neighbors. We're in Atlanta. So out there where you are, you alluded earlier to the fact, you live in this beautiful place. You have a beautiful life. You have the horses, wildlife. You do all these cool things, but you don't make a ton of money. It's not,
right.
And that's not the biggest deal in the world, right? It's the lifestyle. But we all know things are changing all the time. And, obviously for someone like you, this really cool thing is like grown out of your life. I'm sure we'll keep talking about it more, all the things that you do. But do you think for some of the other people that love the life and they've grown up in the West and they've kind of got to the point, they're young adults, but they've got to the point where they are locked in. They love doing it. They want to be there. But they don't kind of have maybe the connections you have, or have an alternate way of making money or something. And they just kind of want that simple, cowboy lifestyle. But, land's getting expensive, and maybe their folks are selling the ranch. And is there any kind of a hopeless attitude at all among people that do what you do, but aren't you, obviously? I'm just trying to get kind of a what do you call that? Like a pulse on the heartbeat out there, not being someone who lives there currently or knows a lot of people, closely in your area.
So yeah, we all struggle. I mean, every day I wonder, it's working okay now, the ranch and what we're doing, but we're getting choked out. I mean, I'm no different than anybody else. Land is going through the roof. It is very pretty. We're about an hour south of Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and the motto is the billionaires are pushing the millionaires out of Jackson. They're coming down here, and I mean, ranch people, cow people, just any regular people cannot afford to buy ground, including us. We were lucky and got most of ours bought here the last 10 years before it really went nuts. But it's still very expensive. I mean, it's still something that we have to really, watch every penny, make sure, that's a priority is land. We don't vacation. We don't spend money on anything like that, because everything has to go into this to keep it going. And yeah, I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer, but it's dang near impossible to start up your own ranch and deal in this day and age. And I'm sure everywhere around the country is similar. I think everybody's got different problems, but in a way we all have similar problems. The cattle market is a little better this year, but and I've had a million people tell me this, man, calves are so high. You guys are doing great. Yeah, they're better than they've been, but diesel's up. Everything else is up. And I don't think people realize that just because you're selling a $1,500 calf, that your expenses aren't still $1,000, $1,200 a cow. It's not like, I don't think you look around the country and see any rancher or person in ag just getting filthy rich. I don't know. I don't think people realize that in your weather, and this winter we had, there was so much death loss. It was a record-breaking winter, and there's no guarantees in anything that we do. And it just, given the economy, the inflation, the wealthy people coming in and buying up all the good farmland, it's a battle. And it's not, there's not the same opportunity now. You used to could work hard and hustle and save your money. And just, you could put something together. And in a way, maybe you can now, but it's not. It's all uphill. It's a tough deal. And, when I've had people reach out to me before and say, hey, I want to start a ranching deal, I said, no, go work for somebody. Make sure that's what you want to do, and then start slow. So I started with 5 head of cows, and I had to do everything on the side, from fencing and building hay sheds. And you always have 100 different jobs to try and keep your cattle business going. And you have to gradually build it. And if I had to do, today what I did 10, 15 years ago when I decided to do this full time, I couldn't do it today. Not with land prices the way they are around me. Farm equipment, everything is so high. It's a tough deal. I don't want to be a negative person, but I also want to tell people how it is.
Yeah, yeah. How long have your ancestors been out there? How many generations?
So my great-great-grandfather came here in 1883 and is kind of on the home place. But long story short, I didn't inherit anything. It kind of got chopped up. one great grandpa gave a bunch of ground to a bunch of his boys. Boys got divorced, whatever. Anyway, you know how that goes. So a lot of it got chopped up. My dad's kind of bought a lot of it back as he could afford it. And then we have to lease a lot of ground. All our summer, where our cattle are in the summer, is all on a national forest, so it's a permit. So we're fortunate to have that. That's a great deal. But yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So this is something we've talked about on here before, and you know, whether or not, you know, your family still has the land, you know, those guys that went out there in the 1850s or 1880s, all through there, you know, that was the frontier at the time. And for cattle or starting a ranch, maybe, where today the frontier, in fact, we might even be getting behind already, but the frontier is kind of what we're doing right now, or what you do on Instagram, or what the guys are doing in Silicon Valley, or whatever's next. Well, whatever's next, that's the frontier. And we hear
Right.
about it every day if you listen to the news. So that's what's kind of interesting, is it's ironic, but I think, like, we do this internship program here, probably talk about it way too much, but it's interesting to me that, you know, these young guys and gals, they say what you just said a minute ago. They're like, hey, I want to get into the ranching business. And none of them really, well, it's wonderful. You know, they got great aspirations, but they want to own their own place and raise cattle. And we just talked to a guy last podcast, friend of ours, and he's pulling that off, but he's in Kentucky doing regenerative, you know, ranching on a small place, right? But that idea of like running cattle across the plains or up in the mountains of Montana or Wyoming, yeah, like you said, it's getting bought out. It's way too expensive. It's not the frontier anymore. That's not really, like, if you were going to go become the family hero and be the baron and make all the money and save everybody, that's not really the thing to do. It's like,
No,
you know, go to the city and learn
realistic.
how to run a computer really well and stay up all night and work all day. And it's just kind of ironic. And obviously we could commiserate about how things are all day, but have you heard any sort of positive attitudes, or, you know, besides yourself, do you know of anybody who's kind of doing something about it or living their life in a way where they're going to keep on doing the Western tradition and live in that area, but they're not kind of just holding on year by year, but they have a plan for the future, and they have, you know, something that does encourage them, an outlook that's encouraging? Do you know anybody like that, or
You know,
what do you think about that?
most people that I know or am around, so the key is you have to have a full-time job on the side to make the cow deal work. And it doesn't matter how big of an outfit you are. My father-in-law said that for years. He always had a job, and he learned from another guy who was a lawyer, and that lawyer, he worked for him forever running yearlings, and that lawyer told him, your cows aren't going to pay the bills. You have to have a job so you can run cows. And everybody that I know has a job, like a regular job. They either work for the city or the county, or they're a brand inspector or whatever. And so when they have that, obviously it allows them to be able to do what they want as far as the ranching. They might not can do it 100% full time. Obviously, well, they're doing it full time, but they have to split their hours, you know, accordingly. And so I think when you have that, if you're set up that way, it gives you a little bit more hope, because, I mean, some years you're going to go way in the red on cows, you know, it just depends on the weather and luck and all of that you don't have any control over. But if you can stay afloat with your job, it kind of allows you to keep on going. Whereas if you didn't have that and you go under, you know, the banker might let you get by another year or two, but eventually they're going to say, no, you're selling out. So I guess have another option. Don't be, you know, backed into a corner. And like I said, most people around here, in fact, I don't think there's anybody that doesn't have something, a backup income source. So if you have that, I think it helps you be a little more positive and optimistic. You know, yeah, it was a a tough winter. We had some big losses, but hopefully next year's better.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Have you heard people say, yeah, just wait till those, Californians or wherever they moved in from, wait till they feel the first snow and
Yep.
stick around for winter and they'll be out of here. Is that just wishful thinking or do they really leave?
A little of both. I mean, yeah, we definitely say that. And the sad part is they can get on their jet and fly out of here. They don't have to winter here. And you'll get a few people that'll say, no, this is not for me. I'll come back just for the summer, or they'll just have a summer home. But they're not leaving. They're coming in faster than ever. So, yeah, it don't deter them. They can leave. So,
yeah. It's not like we don't have
like
heat.
I said, there might be a handful that leave and say, I'm never going back. But the ones who really want to live here for the summers and whatnot, they just get on their jet and do whatever they want. So, yeah, it doesn't change much. We wished it would, but it don't.
Yeah.
So has the photography and, kind of everything, we don't need to get into your finances too deep, but has that all like kind of been your supplementary income for some of that?
Yep, a little bit. Not much. It's not what everybody thinks by any means. Like I said, we've always had any job we could get. I mean, if there's a fencing job come up, you take it. Whatever jobs there are out there, we take. The photography thing, the last year or so, is getting to where it gives me a little bit of cushion. Helps me buy a little bit of hay if I need to. I'm really hoping in the coming years to grow on that a little bit and make it more of an official business to where it does really help financially. So yeah, to answer your question, the last couple of years, just a little tiny bit. Pocket change to most, I'm sure, but it does help me, like I said, buy hay or, whatever I need expenses wise. So that helps. And yeah, I'm just wanting to kind of expand. I just went to a workshop here this last weekend and learned a ton about commercial photography and kind of the business side of things. And so I'm ready to kind of dive into that and see how things go. But in the meantime, I'm not afraid to, if a job comes up for, a fence or a hay shed or riding a colt or whatever it is, I'm going to do it because I need to.
Gotcha. Well, while we're on the topic, if there's anyone listening right now and they want to hire you for the photography deal, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Probably message me on Instagram and then I could give an email address. But yeah, Instagram is where I spend the majority of my time, sorry. And it's just Skye Clark Images.
Yeah.
And yeah, just send me a message there. And I have a website, I think, but it's kind of crappy. I just barely set it up. But it's skyclarkimages.com. And there's a contact sheet there if somebody's interested. So.
Yeah, good.
Hey, let me turn a light on in here. Can you guys, is it getting dark?
Yeah, no problem.
Give me a sec.
No problem.
Yeah, then I guess if she doesn't get back to them right away, that's because everybody's been asking the same stupid question and she's waiting to make a group post.
No, there's no stupid questions. I try to get back to them, everybody. I try to answer everybody as long as they're respectful in that. But yeah, I do. If people take the time to message me, I will message you back. I'm not, and it might take me a day or two depending on what's going on. But yeah.
No, that's so cool. I think so. I'm getting married soon, and my fiance's been trying to plan stuff, and she was messaging back and forth with this wedding planner in New York that's got like 4 or 5 million followers, and I was like so amazed, and it made her day that this lady would message her back.
Right.
But
right.
That's got to be something else. But I can't imagine. I mean, even someone like you, that's a lot of traffic. I know you say you're just you, but still, it doesn't matter who you are. If you have that much traffic, that's got to be. Do you ever get kind of tired of all the messages? And I don't mean you get tired of the people, but do you ever think like, gosh, I wish I just didn't have to. because I'm sure you must feel obligated. Like you've put yourself in that position. So now when somebody does message you, you can't just ignore them. I get that. Do you ever wish that I don't know, that following would ever go away? Or do you ever think about that? Like, where does that go? I've thought about this a lot of times. Like, we're all pretty young people now, right? But like, what's going to happen like 50 years from now? Are we still going to have Instagram and have all those followers sitting there all the same age, grown up, like wanting to still look in on our lives?
Mm-hmm. Well, so for me, it doesn't bother me that people message me. It's the way I handle it. So I used to get all stressed out. I'd come home after a day and I'd open Instagram or something and I think, gosh dang, I have to reply to all these people. But now I just say, I will reply to them, but I'm going to do it when I'm not tired or if I have. So I try to prioritize, my day, what's most important, what I need to get done. And so, yeah, it's more on how I perceive it and handle it. I don't let it stress me out like it used to. But no, it doesn't bother me. It doesn't, most of them I look forward to hearing from. Yeah.
Yeah.
And to answer your question on the future, I have no clue. I can't imagine. And I guess I don't really, I just kind of live in the moment and this is working now. Great. If social media completely dies tomorrow, my life won't change one bit. I'm going to still be doing what I do. I'm still going to like what I do. I'll still be taking pictures, even if nobody sees them,
Yep.
Yeah. So it's awesome. It's cool. It's awesome to connect. It opens up opportunities. You're able to make connections just like with you guys. And so it's cool to connect. And I tell people all the time, social media can be good, bad. It's up to you. If you don't like following something or if it's negative, unfollow them. It's not that big of a deal. You can kind of curate it to what you want to see. If you want to see positive stuff, follow that. Get rid of all the negative stuff. So yeah, it can be whatever you want it to be. For me, it's kind of a more of a connection thing. And now obviously it helps with the business side of things a little bit, but it's still all about connection.
Yeah. No, I'm totally with you. Just let the future play out and that'll work itself out. I just had to ask because sometimes, you have these weird thoughts and then we have these guests. And then especially when it's somebody who's spent hundreds of hours on the back of a horse by themselves, you never know if they've just picked some thought and mulled over it and have just like an Einsteinian level of an answer,
Right.
But your simple answer is much better. You never know. It is funny. Like I have found that though, interviewing people and you'll ask them something you didn't think was a big deal. And then they're like, oh yeah, I've been thinking about that for like 10 years.
Yeah.
No, but I'm with you. Who knows what'll happen, right? And that's the exciting thing about the future. But that's a whole different topic, anyhow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so here's something that I really need to ask you about.
Okay.
Because I was like Ben, I was reminding myself of I've been following you on Instagram for a couple years now. So is that y'all's place where you've got the draft horses and you're putting out hay in the wintertime? Is that
yeah, so just to kind of clarify, so I do go around and take pictures of like my neighbors.
Sure.
So we feed round bales. So anything with the teams and horses and we're pitching round bales of hay, that's us. Or even the hand bales, we feed some smaller bales as well. The loose hay deal is my neighbors.
Okay.
So yeah, if that helps.
So there's multiple people in the area using draft. My dad's kind of big into the draft thing. He's got teams of mules.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of big into the draft mule thing. That seems to be fairly popular in like the Southeast and the Midwest where we're around the draft mule deal. But yeah, I wouldn't say there's a lot of people outside of maybe like an Amish community here or there that's actually on a working ranch instead of like a hobby farm or something where they're using draft animals like that for labor. So what's the reason? Is it just because of the amount of snow you get, or is it just how they've always done it? Like, what's the reason for using the draft horses for the hay?
Yeah, so a little of both. like my neighbors, the Campbells, that feed the loose hay, and that's the pictures with the loose hay. They are as old school as they get. I mean, they don't own tractors. They have like a couple of old Massey Ferguson tractors. So for them, this is the cheapest, most efficient way for them to put up their hay, feed their hay, feed their cattle. For us, I just love feeding with the team. But there are times like this past winter when the snow gets so deep, yeah, if you take a tractor, you're going to be stuck all day, high centered. I mean, it's a wreck. A team, it might take you longer to feed, but you can always get the job done. And I just love workhorses, always have. We grew up with them. My grandpa had them. He fed the elk up Grays River, and of course up there, anyway, it's on national forest, no power, no anything up there. So grew up doing that. And it's kind of been a family thing. But me personally, I absolutely love them. I love working with them. So I just make it a point to feed with them. We can feed, and we do feed with a tractor and a big fifth wheel trailer. Like if in a hurry or, something. But I do it mostly just because I enjoy it. I enjoy the work. There's nothing else to do in the wintertime anyway. So, I mean, there's no point in being in a hurry, most of the time.
Yeah. You're not getting on your jet to do the weekends in California?
Yeah, no, not yet. Maybe next year I'll get one. But yeah, so that's kind of, but like I said, it does, the snow typically does get pretty deep here, and a lot of times, yeah, especially newer tractors, they can waller a lot of snow, and most people around here are doing it with tractors. But like I said, the Campbells, they're legit old school. I mean, that's their only means, and for us, it's needed most of the time, but it's mostly just because I enjoy it.
Yeah. Okay, so I've got two questions from that. The first question is so you said he's feeding elk. Why do you need to feed hay to elk?
Well, so the elk, they come out of Yellowstone National Park. This is kind of the history of it in a nutshell. And when the settlers and the ranchers and everybody were living in Jackson Hole, so Jackson Hole, a lot of grass. There's a huge elk refuge up there now. They winter about 10,000 head. But this whole region of Wyoming is full of elk. And in the early 1900s, in 1906 or 1909, the elk were starving to death because, all the ranchers, of course, were putting up their hay and doing that. Well, the elk were used to coming down to Jackson for the winter, coming out of Yellowstone and wintering there. Well, now there's no hay. All the hay's in the, or no grass. All the grass is in the stack yards, fenced off. And they say that you could walk, the old timers say that in those couple of winters, you could walk on dead elk carcasses and never touch a foot on the ground for miles. So, long story short, the Game and Fish Commission kind of got together, and a few ranchers started kind of feeding the elk. They just felt bad. They thought, dang, we can't let all these elk die. And it started like that, and then gradually over the years, the Wyoming Game and Fish set up this program to where I think there's like 23 feed grounds. And it's more in western Wyoming. I don't think they do it anywhere else. Just kind of here where we get big, heavy winters. And they're kind of scattered all over from here where I'm at, and then over the hill around Pinedale is the majority of them. A few up in Jackson, and it's all, so they hire feeders, which I was one for a while. Grandpa was one for a long time, 23 years or something. So yeah, you go to these feed grounds in the wintertime. Most of them are just, you have to snow machine into and out of, like up Grays River where Grandpa was. And then my dad also fed up there after Grandpa started getting a little older. You snow machine in, 30 miles, whatever. You live in a little cabin all winter. You go out, you harness your team, you throw on your loads of hay, go out, feed them to the elk. The elk kind of come into these designated areas. They've been doing it, like I said, early 1900s. And it prevents all the elk from dying. And it's all completely funded by hunting licenses. So it's a pretty cool thing because people think, well, all hunters want to do is kill, and that's not the case. I mean, if it wasn't for hunters, these elk would have starved to death and been dead years ago. So it's a huge conservation thing. But yeah, I know it's kind of a different deal. A lot of people haven't heard about it, but that's kind of, yeah, that's another part of life here. So
yeah, no, that's pretty unique. So, see, that's like Ben was talking about earlier. We got to ask all these little questions because I never would have known anything about that. Wow, so that's remarkable. And then, so I guess at one point you were like a third generation elk feeder then.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. Yep. When we fed up the Grove Aunt, that was just a place kind of north of Jackson there, and there were actually three small feed grounds on that deal, and they were each about 10 miles apart or so. We fed probably, I think it was like 2,800 elk up there. Okay. And elk are a little bit, so cows, most people around here in the wintertime, you figure about 30 pounds of hay per cow, roughly. And elk only eat 10 pounds. So for that many head, we were feeding like 300 bales a day, just hand bales, 100-pound bales, 80-pound bales. And actually, you guys probably know Gabe, my brother Gabe. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so he fed up him. Yeah. Anyway, he fed up the Grove as well with Jay Hogan there for a year or two after I kind of got done. And
now, is this all with the teams, or they don't?
Yep.
Okay.
Nope. All horses. Yep.
Wow.
And like I said, you're kind of out somewhere where there's no power or anything. I mean, you live in a little cabin. You have an outhouse and some gas lanterns, and I mean that's what you do all winter.
Gotcha.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't realize you stayed there for several months like a job.
Yep. Usually from basically December through the 1st of April is a pretty average time frame for that.
So I don't think anyone's actually said this, but this is how I heard it. Because I've met Gabe once at Buck's place, and but obviously heard about both you and him, and I think Gabe's got a brother too, like a twin brother.
Yep, Matt.
Yeah. But anyway, someone was like,
"Oh, he's my brother too." But.
Well, yeah. But I meant he had a twin.
Yeah, no, I got it.
So I'm an only child, so I don't know how to socialize. I'm like a puppy that didn't get exposed to other dogs early enough or something. But anyway, but I've heard people say they're like, oh yeah, all the Clarks, they've done stuff that like kind of seem feral to most people, and I didn't really know what that meant. I was like, oh okay, and I saw you on Instagram like netting sheep and all this crazy stuff, so I was like, well, I believe it. Seems like wild, but yeah, that's pretty unique. Where it's like, yeah, go spend your winter up, using gas lamps and feeding elk. Like that is. There's probably a lot of people in the United States that don't realize that there's people in first world countries doing that. And I don't mean that as like a negative thing.
Yeah.
Like that seems awesome. That would be like I feel like I would love to spend a winter doing that, just to say like you've done it and get that experience. So that makes a lot of sense when people are like, oh yeah, the Clarks, they kind of like, they're out in the wilderness. So and it's like, yep, that's pretty much is out in the wilderness. That's for darn sure.
I imagine that's incredibly peaceful up there. You don't have do you have cell reception?
No, and I don't know about now. I haven't. I'm sure with satellite phones and all the technology and Starlink and whatnot now, it's probably a lot different. But yeah, I mean, you live up there. I remember like being a little kid and we'd snow machine up to see Grandpa for Christmas or spring break or whatever it was. And I mean, we just had a ball, but you have to have that, and I think most kids probably would, especially then. I mean, we didn't grow up with any technology, so we could go out and just be completely entertained by sticks and building hay forts and, doing what kids do. I don't know if today's kids would be able to go up there and go, well, what do we do? There's no iPads, there's no video games. I don't know. Maybe they'd have a ball, but yeah, I remember like whenever a visitor would come, which was so rare back then. It was like the highlight of your day. You get so excited to see somebody. And anyway, you didn't get a ton of visitors throughout the winter. Most of them was family that would come up and stay the night and help feed a day or two or whatever. But yeah, it's their outhouse. You shovel all your own snow. We've got a ton of old pictures of, and Grandpa even kept a journal, which is pretty cool. And he kind of made it into a book, just of his daily, chores, mountain lions coming in, wolves coming in, how many elk do they kill a night. I mean, a lot of really cool, unique stories, and he made those into a book. So it's cool to have that. But yeah, there was no electricity, no, technology whatsoever. And
what are you eating when you're up there?
There's just stuff that you pack in. So
yeah,
on occasion, whenever you get low or have to run out or something, you just jump on your snow machine and buzz out. Like I said, it's around about 35 miles down to where there would be, a town or a phone or whatever. Mm-hmm. But yeah, most of it, like leading up to the fall, you can drive a pickup up there, in the fall. And so you just kind of plan ahead and you take, so when we was up the Grove, we took an old freezer and just put it outside and then hauled a bunch of meat up once the days were cold enough that, it stayed frozen. There's no electricity. So the freezer would just basically to keep all the creatures out. And so we'd haul meat up and then, yeah, you just, haul a bunch of canned goods. And I don't know.
Yeah.
That.
And so is there like a barn for the horses or how are they?
Nope. Nobody out here has, horses are naturally made to handle this stuff, and obviously they acclimate to, if a Texas horse comes up here, he's going to freeze because he's not used to growing the winter hair and all that for a year or two. But
yeah,
if they're here, they're built for it. They're made for it. We feed them extremely well. And that's a key. I don't think a lot of people realize that, especially horses that are working all the time, you feed them extremely well. They're going to stay healthy. They're going to be strong. They're going to be warm. Make sure they have good, fresh running water. And so you might have to chop ice every day or something like that. But as long as they have good, fresh water and really good feed, they're awesome. No problems.
Yeah. I guess I was asking about the barn more from a, like if you got one of those big snows, like finding your horse or, having them close enough, that was more a question, but that makes sense if they're out there running in it, especially those big draft horses. Gosh, it's almost like they prefer that kind of weather.
Yeah. And they live in a corral, obviously, that's tall enough the elk can't jump in and eat their hay. But when they're living in it all day, even as it snows, they're walking around, they constantly keep packing it down. So they might be standing on, maybe if you might get a heavy snow one night of a foot or something like that, and they might be standing in that, but that's no big deal. And, by the end of the spring, you might be having, 5-6 feet of snow up there, but most of it is packed down under them. So it's like a solid ice, not ice really, but it's just packed down. So it's not like they're sinking clear to the ground. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So it's not like they're ever out there standing in snow that's like up over their backs or anything like that, because they kind of keep it packed down.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. That makes sense. And then I imagine you probably have some pretty cold morning because and again, I'm in Virginia, so it's a very, very domestic compared to what you're talking about. But I've had to like harness horses in sub-freezing temperatures, and it's not very fun.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 20 and 30 below is pretty common. That's, and you'll have it anywhere from, a week at a time to a month at a time. It just, who can guess the weather? But that's kind of, it can dang sure get colder than that, but that's kind of the average. And it's not that way all winter. Probably, I would say maybe 0-ish might be an average for cold. most winters. And we have a real dry cold here. We don't have any humidity whatsoever. So I've heard people say that, it feels warmer here at like 10 below zero than it does if you were in a super humid place at zero or something like that. I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, you work in all kinds of weather. I mean, it don't matter if you're feeding cows, sheep, elk, whatever, work has to be done. So it doesn't matter how cold it is. And that's it. I mean, obviously farm equipment isn't going to start. So that's another reason for horses.
Yeah. So, and we're not a draft horse podcast, but I have some other draft horse questions for you.
Okay.
At least the ones you're using on your ranch and stuff like that. A past guest we've had on the podcast, Kurt Pate, I heard him say once when he was doing a stockmanship clinic, he's like, the ranch horse is the only thing that is on the ranch, the only asset on the ranch that the more you use it, the more valuable it becomes.
Yep.
And obviously he was talking about saddle horses, but is there any of that where, you have a tractor, you buy a tractor, it depreciates over time. Like you said, you get your old Massey Ferguson, especially if it's like a generational property. There's just a bunch of old equipment around. Is there any element of that? Because maybe you spend a winter or two training up a team, and then you sell a team because now they're like a proven ranch team and they have a lot of value. No different than someone might take their horse to like a nice ranch horse sale, and they've been using it and they've put, maybe tens of thousands of dollars of value into that horse. Like, is there any of that with these teams that you see, or is it kind of, if you get a good one, you just keep them and roll with it?
A little of both. So I see a lot more teams advertised now, but most of them are back east. There's a few maybe around Utah-ish, but like for our deal, we use ours, and they're nothing, special or fancy, but they do the job really well. And to me, it's hard once you get a good one. It's harder to, even if you could sell it for $20,000-$30,000, whatever, it's harder to replace them. You know what I mean? I don't know. So for me personally, no. If we get a good one, we hold on to them. A lot of like our horses are half draft, so usually Perchin is the draft side, and then quarter horse or cow horse or something for the other side. And that, for us, that allows us to, without having to have a million horses around, we use them for all of it. So the same horse I ride all winter or all summer, he's pulling the sleigh in the winter. So they have to do it all. They're packing salt, whatever we're doing. So that's kind of how we're set up. Our horses have to kind of do it all for the most part. But yeah, like the Campbells, they've had their teams their whole lives. They buy them pretty young and get them broke, and they work good for them. And it's not really a money thing. They're a tool, and they work really well, and they're really hard to replace. So you don't see a ton of teams for sale. You will, here and there, but it's not a huge market.
Sure. Yeah. I was asking because at least here in the eastern United States, that seems to have gotten more popular, and it's a different deal. You don't know if this is just someone's kind of hobby ranch or hobby farm or whatever, but they'll do things like, put up all their hay with a team of horses for a year or two,
right?
And then take it to some sale in Ohio or something like that, make a bunch of money, and then you take, maybe a fifth of what you just made, and then you go get yourself another set of colts and you work them a couple seasons.
Yep.
And it's just basically it's another revenue stream for your ranch. But I understand the alternative of that. Maybe those people are using their horses more seasonally, so they can kind of look at it where we'll hit them a couple times and then send them down the road. But yeah, I can understand where, especially where you guys are and what you're doing, it just, like you said, almost becomes impossible to replace them because they're just so valuable to every day. Not just, well, they're really useful in the spring, but if we sell them in August, we'll have 6 months to train up a new set or something like that.
Right.
Yep. So interesting.
Well, I've got a question for you. And again, it's going to kind of change gears slightly. But in light of all this, we're talking about like the richness of your life now. Early on, when you were a kid, and I guess a young adult, grown up, was there a time when you looked outside of the ranch life for something to do and thought about leaving and going somewhere else?
Yes and no. So I've always been kind of I'm an introvert, so I'm fine. I can be alone for months on end, and it doesn't bother me. I'm not a super social person. I got into, all by accident, the personal training industry right out of high school, and fitness and that was just, I had to take a extra credit course in high school, or an elective, whatever you call it. And I thought, well, what's the easiest one I can pick here? And there was weightlifting. I said, all right, I'll do that. Well, anyway, I got in there, and it worked for me. Growing up the way we did, I mean, I was the oldest, and so, Dad just treated me like a boy, and that's just what you did. You just worked. And so anyway, I was fairly strong going into it. And anyway, I did really well with the weightlifting thing, and kind of thought, well, maybe, started looking into, well, can you make money at this? And I started looking into like being a personal trainer and things like that. So right out of high school, it did kind of cross my mind, thinking, maybe I can do this, a little bit on the side. And I did do it. But again, it was always to like supplement the life that I love to do. But yeah, for the most part, me personally, I've just always been that kid that I like the outdoors, either ranching or, I worked for a guy so mom and dad were outfitters in the hunting business growing up. So that's what we grew up doing. Gabe and Matt, Jace, my brothers, they're all really good hunters, really good guides. They've done it. I mean, they're awesome at it. And then I just worked for outfitters packing. So pack in camps. So I'd pack in stuff like that. And I really liked that. Anyway, long story short, I've always known I have to be outside. I love the outdoors. So ranching, hunting, anything in those industries is my deal. So I didn't really look for a city life or something that could make me more money. Of course, we always need more money. So for me, it was like, okay, how can I make more money still being able to be outside? So that was kind of my thing. I did the personal training thing, but I do it on the side. And then, yeah, sorry if that doesn't really answer your question. But
so something like personal training, was that very difficult to do where you are? Because I would imagine, if you're in a city or a very suburban area, there's lots of people, there's gyms, that's kind of your market. But where you are, I would think that would be kind of slim pickings unless you were like an online fitness trainer.
So you're dead right. I started out, and it was pretty slow. It was pretty hard to get started. But about the time I started is really when a lot of the wealthy people were moving in. And I built up my knowledge and my clients, and the results were really good. And I was very fortunate to get some very high-end clients. So they helped me, pay the bills, and I got them great results, and that all worked. And then I transitioned to all online because I was doing in-home training. So I would drive to every client's home and do workouts with them. I'd bring all the equipment with me and, work with their nutrition and all that. And I did it all in person, one-on-one, in the privacy of their home. And some of the wealthier people really like that because, they want to be pretty private and all of that. So that worked out. And that's how I did it. And then when I kind of was seeing that the time thing was an issue. You know, I only have so much time in a day. I can't have more clients than I've already got. I transitioned to the online thing, did the online thing. It went really well for, you know, I don't even know how long, several years. And then I transitioned to doing some group training here just in town. And I just made it a lot more affordable, but it was bigger groups of people. And I did a boot camp thing. I was the first one in the Valley to do anything like it and did really well at that. And when I was finally able to buy my house, pay cash for it, all of that, I did that, got out of it and said, okay, I'm going to ranch full time. So that's what I did.
Wow.
That's
awesome.
Quite
an undertaking. That is awesome. So now that you have gotten out of it, and I don't want to pry into like your personal life, so you answer however you want. But I like hearing people's opinion, especially people that, you know, work kind of blue collar, ranchers, farmers, people like that. Do you still work out outside of your work, or do you feel like your daily routine and work is enough as it is? Because you kind of hear both opinions. You know, you hear some people that say, no, I kind of work out as I work every day, and then other people supplement that or do extra.
No, so for me personally, I don't. My work is enough. Genetically, I tell people I'm a perchin. I mean, I was built with great big bones, and I have naturally kind of a lot of muscle, more than I want actually. So that's not a problem for me. And I'm so physical day to day that is not an issue for me. I don't have to go do something extra, but I do walk as much as I can. So in the wintertime, if I'm like pitching hay and all that, it's all my upper body and my arms. And if I want to get some cardio in or something like that, you know, I do have a treadmill and I basically just walk on an incline. That's kind of my thing. That's about all I do. In the summertime, I hardly ever get on the treadmill. I'm horseback most of the time. And then like with irrigating and all that, I just try to walk to like all the fields and do my work that way. But yeah, for me personally, I don't hit the gym. I tried last year. I got a membership for a couple of months and I think I made it like 3 times and I just thought this isn't worth it. So yeah.
Yeah. No, you got a busy life. Gosh, you could probably get some free help if you started up your program again, but just had people come out and pitch hay bales for you and work for free.
Yeah,
That's
the funny part. People have joked about that. I'm like, no, you wouldn't. When it's 80 degrees and that sweat's running down your back into the crack of your ass, you are not gonna. That ain't fun, you know. People like to be in an air conditioning building, and yet, like you said, there might be a few that would do it, but it's funny. I'll see people go to the gym, and then they'll be out on their riding lawnmower. I'm going, why don't you just get a push mower and save your gym membership? But I think different, I guess. So
yeah, I think you'd have to package it as like an all-encompassing personal development experience.
Yeah,
it would have to be a little broader than just working out. But yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
It is funny how people rationalize, like some of the people that do the hardest, most insane workouts also will like avoid, you know, going upstairs or
right.
You know, be on the riding lawnmower, like these little simple everyday things they kind of checking out on.
Yep.
And then they go do stuff that, you know, working people are like, what are you doing? That's crazy.
Yeah. To each their own. And I don't care and I don't judge and all of that. But no, for me personally, I don't feel like, I mean, I can always, you know, lose a roll here and there, but I like to eat. So I try to balance that out with just staying active.
No, that's great. Gosh, yeah, that's a wild story. That's amazing. So you really put some effort into that, but obviously, you know, it served its course. I didn't realize, you know, you said you paid for your house in cash from doing that. That obviously wasn't just on the side, but I mean, that just goes to show that if you have
it was a lot of years of saving and sacrificing and knowing what I wanted to achieve. I mean, it was a lot of years of going without so I could do it. But I've watched too many people be enslaved to a mortgage their whole life. And I'm not going to do that. So buy what you can afford. And I don't know. That's just my philosophy. But work your butt off. Don't pay interest. I mean, obviously you have to, for a little while on things, or you don't get anything bought. But that's always been something that I've strived to do. And I know everybody's situation is a little different, but buy what you can afford, live within your means, and always plan ahead, and forget all the new trucks and then crap like that you don't need. Buy what you can afford, and it doesn't matter if your buddy down the street just got a brand new Duramax. And so here's an example: feeding elk, we had to have a snow machine and a snow machine trailer. Well, that kind of stuff is expensive. You had to have a truck to pull it, all of that. We found a 1988 Oldsmobile car, welded a hitch on the back of it for the snow machine trailer. And then we bought this old granny 2-seat snow machine that a couple of us could just ride back and forth up the road when we needed. And we'd go downtown Jackson, Wyoming. I mean, it's, ritzy, high dollar people. And we'd get pointed at and made fun of all the time for driving our old crappy car, pulling a snow machine. And, oh, well. Yeah.
Speaking of old vehicles, tell me about that that old white truck on your Instagram, and then tell me about the other truck with the stock racks. Are those y'all's?
So the white one is actually my uncle's, and he just lives a mile up the road from me. And it was his father-in-law's truck, and it's original 1956. They've never done anything to it other than just a couple little tiny, whatever. But it's all original. His father-in-law used it. They were near Sacramento, California, I believe. And they would haul, a cow or a calf or something to the stock yards back then. And he used that a little bit. So my uncle's had it, and he kind of just keeps it in a shed all the time. And I just asked him one day, I've always wanted to, my horses ride in my stock rack anyway. And so they're broke to it. And I just got this idea one day, it'd be kind of cool. And I said, hey, what do you think? Can I borrow your truck? And, anyway, so that was just kind of for pictures and just for fun. But that was my uncle's truck. And then my other truck, so my brown truck that I use all the time, I'm the cow herder. So I'm responsible for taking care of all the cattle. There's several ranchers that put their cattle out on the forest in the summer on the permit. And anyway, I'm the herder. Yeah, that picture. Yep. So that's my uncle's 1956 Ford, and that's my horse Roni, and then my dog Molly laying there by it. And that's just in my pasture there, my front pasture right out here. But anyway, my brown truck. So I'm the cow herder up here on this association, and there's some just gravel roads in that, and I don't want to beat a trailer around and whatnot for one horse all the time. So we just built a 2x4 rack for the back of it. It's cheap and easy and works, and just load a horse in it and go. So that's what I use a lot during the summer. And I do have a trailer that I pull if I'm hauling cows or hauling several horses, packing salt or whatever I'm doing. But yeah, I use a stock rack a lot.
That's cool. That's really cool. Talk about that job a little bit. So how many herds are kind of going together? And I guess, is it just some sort of allotment on national land, federal land?
So it's a cattle allotment, and it's on the area of forest we're on is roughly between 50 and 60,000 acres. That's kind of the area these cattle can be in. And the Forest Service has it set up to where they want them in certain pastures at a certain time, the way we rotate it. And there's, 5-6 different ranchers that we all come together and turn the cows out. And, on our deal, it's a lot smaller. There's only about 600 head on the whole thing. And so that's what I'm responsible for, kind of keeping the bulls in them, especially early on, packing blocks of salt up high in the mountains, keep them scattered. utilizing the feed, keeping them off the riverbanks and the creeks a lot. The Forest Service, they don't want them down living on the river and the riparian areas and whatnot. So try to keep them scattered and not overgrazing certain areas and that, and just try to keep them balanced and scattered, and take doctor sick ones if you see them. So we usually turn out June 1st, and we're just started gathering. We're still getting a few stragglers right now. We rode all day today to get some, but our come-off date, our official date when we have to gather, is the 10th of October. And then, it always takes our country it's pretty steep, and there's 1,018 holes those cows can hide in. There's canyons and draws and big basins and whatnot. So, like right now, we rode all day, started at daylight this morning, got back to the truck, and we found 2. And your horses are give out. It's a big thing. It's to back ride and find them all. But anyway, makes good horses. And what else are you going to do? So you just will go ride.
That's a good attitude to have about the whole deal.
Yeah. Well, you have to, because some days you think, oh, for hell's sakes. And there's a lot of days you'll ride all day and you won't find one, or they'll get away from you or something, and we're supposed to get a big snow here in another day or two, and that'll help track them and locate them a little better. But
gotcha. Yeah. It's kind of like, it's like having a hunting mentality.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. And these cows,
over and
time
over.
of year too, they get wild. I don't know if anybody's ever hunted elk, but these cows are just like hunting elk. You take your binoculars and you glass and you find them. And when you find them, you don't just say, well, let's just go get around them. You have to all right, well, let's sneak down this draw, and you have to stay out of sight as long as possible until you're kind of in position, like behind them if you're wanting them to go the other direction. You have to kind of put a sneak on them and get set up, and then make sure you're mounted well enough you can keep up with them, because it's a horse race and it's steep, and you're going up big old side hills and trying to outrun them. And it's kind of different, for some. Like growing up here and growing up hunting, it's normal to us, but it might not be to people used to more flat country.
Yeah. I was gonna say there's probably not a lot of ranchers in Nebraska that can empathize with your problems.
Right. And I don't really care, if you get empathized with or not. But like I said, there's different challenges. It doesn't matter where you go. If you're in Florida, I'm sure absolutely. They have different problems than we do. But anyway, that's just, you just asked about the permit, and that's a little bit.
Yeah.
Kind of how
no, it wasn't a knock at all. But you're right in that it's like a unique challenge, because a lot, in those Great Plains states, not that I've spent a ton of time out there, but I've been on enough ranches out there where it's like, it's pretty quantifiable, the circle you have to do. Right. And you're not thinking like, well, do we need to dip in here? Do we not need to dip in here? You can pretty much get up on the hill and do a 180, and you're like, well, there's 3 places there could be cattle.
Yeah.
And then we're going to go. That's at least what I've gathered. I'm sure there's probably someone hopefully in Nebraska listening right now, and they're like, Joe's full of crap. But anyway, so how many horses do you kind of keep in a rotation to be doing that job regularly? Because you were talking about how it's hard on that kind of day of work is hard on a horse.
Yeah. So this time of year, I have 4. It can even more than that. It just depends on the horse and how much they can handle and what colts are going and whatnot. But so specifically this fall, I use 4, and so they get 3 days off in between. But yeah, and some days are easier than others. You try to guess what your day is going to be like. I'm sure everybody in the cowboy world does this, but there's some days you can take a colt. Like, okay, today's going to be a pretty easy day. This will be a good day for a colt, a smaller circle, whatever. And sometimes it does not go as planned, but you learn that after a while, and And if you're ever in question, take your bigger, better, stouter horse. If you're thinking, I wonder what this day's going to end up like. Usually it's a lot longer than it is shorter. Typically this time of year, but yeah, in the summertime, 2 to 3 full-time horses, and if I'm packing salt, I always have a couple of colts that are loaded with salt or whatever, but, that's, yeah. And they're constantly rotating. If you get done with a colt or whatever, or he's tired, or he's learned what you want him to or whatever for a while, I'll turn him out for a while, use him early on in the summer, and then maybe get him in for like our corral work, if you're sorting and things like that. But 3 to 4 full-time bigger horses seems to work pretty good for me.
Sure.
When you're starting horses, do you use them for packing for a little while before you start using them as a saddle horse?
Yes and no. So I'll get a colt in and I'll ride him, a handful of times or whatever as a 2-year-old. So the way I do it, and again, I'm no colt starter, I'm no bronc buster. Don't take this like that. But yeah, I'll put a couple 3 rides on a 2-year-old, and then maybe that summer I might throw 2 blocks of salt on it and take it for a short circle. Just they learn so much, like in the mountains, as far as like crossing little tiny creeks. When a colt wants to take those great big jumps and break your back or whatever, all that kind of stuff. It helps them learn so much on how to travel, going uphill, downhill, all of that. And you don't have to worry so much about, being out of balance or pulling on their head or stuff like that. They figure that out pretty well just by packing salt and having that weight on them. They learn how to handle themselves. So I like doing that just simply for that reason. But for time-wise, I usually start my colts in the wintertime. And like I said, I'll put a couple 3 rides on them, turn them out, maybe get them in that summer, let them pack salt a time or 2. And then as 3-year-olds, do it again, ride them a little bit more depending on how big they are, how they're going. And then by 4, they're usually going, pretty much full time, definitely at 5. But I don't really put a horse to work till around 4, like really pounding them, I guess. I mean, they get to go to work and do different jobs all the time, but I don't really try to pound them too hard day in and day out until they're at least 4 and typically more like 5.
On those national forest leases, does the government take care of the fencing, or is that something you guys have to do?
No, that's what we're responsible for that as well. Yep. So in the spring, or just before we get to turn out, we don't have a ton of fencing. So there's a big fence in between Wyoming and Idaho, because our cows run right on the border, and we mix, a few all the time. Idaho cows get on us, we get on them. So there's a fence there, and it's not very long, maybe 4 or 5 miles. So we're responsible, keeping it up and maintained, and it's all a drop fence. And I don't know if you guys know what drop fences are, but to anyone who doesn't know, it's basically a solid post in the ground, just like a wood post or a steel post. And then so that post stays there stationary, and your actual fence and your wires are all stapled to, like, we call them dancers, but real small wood posts, basically, a couple inches in diameter. People call them stays. I don't know the terminology around the country, but anyway, So your wire is all stapled to your dancers, and there's a big loop on that dancer. So in the spring, we stand the wire up and just hook the loop over the post that's already there. And what that does, and you do that the whole fence, and in the fall, I just did this other day, you go and drop it. So you lift all those wire loops off so the actual fence all lays on the ground. And that saves so much work and wire and whatnot, because our snow just busts the heck out of wire, and you end up splicing, 1,018 times. And then the elk and the deer and everything, crossing over, it'll bust them. So we have a lot of drop fences, let down fences, whatever you want to call it. And then we have a few drift fences, which aren't like full fences. We position them like if there's a steep canyon. I talk with my hands a lot, but if there's a steep canyon, we'll just put a fence, up to like a steep part or something where we think a cow won't go past,
Yep.
and then like just across the bottom or something like that. So we have a few of those, and responsible for keeping those up and fixed and keeping cows behind them or whatever. But yeah, so we're responsible for fencing as well, but we don't have a ton of it. There might be 10 miles total, if that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Huh. Yeah, the drop fence, that's a pretty genius idea. Is that a pretty common practice? I've never heard of that.
It is out here in deep snow country. Most people have one. I mean, somewhere, somehow. Like I said, it saves a ton of work and a lot of heartache in the spring. I mean, you'll still get a broken wire here and there, but it keeps your fences in a lot better shape long term.
Well, I can imagine.
Yep.
So out there in your part of the country, do you all struggle with wolves or coyotes or wild horses, or what kind of pests do you have plaguing your area?
So for us right here where we're at, we don't have a ton. We have a lot of coyotes, but they don't bother cowmen too bad. I mean, we've never really had an issue losing calves to them or anything. There's a bunch of them around, but they're not a problem for cow people. They are with sheep. They raise hell with sheep. And those guys hunt them pretty hard. The wolves are kind of trickling down here. There's been several here passing through, but they're not here full time yet. They are just, like I said, up in Jackson, up the Grovant where we feed elk. There tons of them. I mean, you'd walk out on the feed ground, and this was early on. We can hunt wolves now, but it doesn't do any good because they're so smart. But we'd walk out on the feed ground, and you'd have 20 elk laying there. Half of them would be dead, half of them still alive, their guts tore out, wrapped around their legs, laying there. Wolves aren't a great thing, and I'm not a person by any means that think they need to be wiped off the face of the earth. I don't know. The way I look at it is God put them here for a reason. I think everything was maybe kind of balanced out, and then maybe man kind of screwed that up a little bit. I don't know. I'm not totally like all wolves need to die or all grizzlies. I like seeing them, but I realize they need to be managed. And yeah, so they are a problem, a lot more so for people over the hill, over around Pinedale, Cora, Green River, and that. They are pretty hard on cows over there. And those guys lose quite a few calves to wolves and a few grizzlies. And like I said, grizzlies and wolves both, they're just kind of trickling here to where I'm at. You'll see them on occasion, hear of them on occasion, but they're not a huge problem right now.
So in the event you did have a grizzly attack or something gets killed by a grizzly, what's the protocol there? And what do they do about it?
So it varies a little bit, but yeah, if it's a verified kill, so if a rancher finds it, and it's pretty fresh, and they're like, yeah, wolf killed it, they have to call the authorities at, whoever, Game and Fish. They have to come out, investigate, make sure, yeah, okay, we agree, it's a legit wolf kill. And there is a compensation program to where the state of Wyoming and whatnot will help the ranchers out.
Wow. So, but did they not go after the grizzly or do something to, I'm just wondering, I mean, you said it's not a problem yet, but if it ever got to be, like, are there other places you know of where they have a pretty consistent problem?
Yeah, up around like Cody on the other side of the park, and then, like I said, over the hill around Pinedale and that, it's getting to be a pretty good problem. There's a lot of people advocating and pushing for like some type of a hunting season on grizzlies, but they're still protected as an endangered species, and I'm not really up on the law there on how far along they are, if they're making headway or not. I know it's been proposed, but where they're at on that, I'm assuming that's probably not going to go over for a while. They might get it done someday, but I mean, there was a grizzly up in Jackson. I don't know if you guys ever heard. She's famous, 399. She was an old bear, and she always had cubs. And I mean, always on the side of the road. So all the tourists, all the people. She's a world-renowned bear, and which again, I like grizzlies. I like seeing them. I'm not against them at all, but they do need to be managed when they become a problem. If they ever do get a hunting season on them, it might help a little bit. The wolf deal is hard because, like I said, they're so smart that even like if a government trapper or something is trying to get one out of a helicopter, they're to the point now they hear a helicopter, it doesn't matter where, they're hid before it can even get in the air. It's almost impossible to get one killed even with a hunting license. So yeah.
Wow. So, but when it comes to grizzlies, not from a legal perspective, but from practicality, it seems like hunting would be a good idea, because that would also keep them, it would give them some respect for just your ranch and people being around, right, and the cattle, and just would change the whole dynamic. Because it seems like eventually that'd be pretty wild if the government was just kind of paying you for their slaughter machine out there.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it would get pretty expensive. I'm sure it does.
Because we like to do that with other things, other larger problems that we like to feed.
Yeah, so, for sure.
I'm not surprised they would do the same with a grizzly.
Yeah, and maybe someday they'll get to that point. But like I said, there's enough people who just see them as these big fluffy teddy bears, that it's kind of a tough deal.
Yeah.
So if they get it passed, I'm sure it will definitely help. But
yeah,
we'll see what happens.
So one other thing I wanted to hit on, and it's kind of related, you mentioned it, more probably than the average ranchy person, you have a lot of sheep on your Instagram. So where do the sheep fit into all of this? Do y'all run sheep, or are those the neighbor
we don't.
deal
Again, these are kind of neighbors and whatnot. So just south of here where I live in Cokeville used to be huge sheep country. And they say there were more millionaires back in like the early 1900s out in Cokeville per capita, which Cokeville is a town of like 100 people. So when they tell you there was more millionaires there per capita than like anywhere else in the country at one point, it was all because of the sheep business. It was huge sheep country. So I love sheep. I love the sheep industry. To touch on that a little bit, basically, and I'm not an expert on it. There's a few guys around here that still are in it. It's died off a lot. They're the same as us. So they run their sheep up here in the mountains. They have their permits, same type of deal. Most of them will typically winter like out on the desert, out by Rock Springs and whatnot, or around the other deserty parts of Wyoming. And then they usually come to the mountains in the summer. And they usually hire sheep herders like from Peru or Argentina or Chile or, Mexico. And those guys come up here and they work and they herd these sheep around in the mountains. They kind of live like nomads, basically. And they herd the sheep up here in the summer in the mountains. And then after they get done weaning their lambs and shipping and whatnot, they trail the ewes by horseback and wagon back out to the desert. So they do everything, kind of old school that way still. And so, yeah, the sheep pictures in that are usually when they get up here in the mountains, kind of where I'm at, herding cows. I like to go out and document them a little bit. It's just a kind of something we kind of grew up with a little bit. We had a few sheep when I was a kid, but not many. My dad and grandpa both, had sheep or worked for guys that had sheep. And so they kind of grew up doing a little bit more, and my uncles and that of the sheep herding and whatnot a little. But yeah, that's a little bit about that. But there's a lot of history. Actually, just tonight, there's a lot of like our quake and aspen trees. they carve in them a lot, and a lot of times it's like just porn, but it's not. It's pretty. They draw. I mean, they're alone all the time, all winter or all summer, and so they'll draw a lot of pictures of like naked girls on a tree, or whatever. But normally, what they always do, they'll put their name and they put it in Spanish or whatever language. I can't ever read it, but they always put a date. And I found one today. It was 1932, so I took a picture of it, and
Wow.
and it's just cool to kind of know that we're right in the same country they did, and that's what I just put it on my story. It's just really neat. So much has changed since 1932, but yet here we are, and we're kind of still doing the same thing. So I don't know. I really like stuff like that, and I have a lot of respect for sheepmen and the sheep herders and just that industry. I really enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. The area I'm in, kind of like the Appalachian Mountains, that's what they say is sheep used to be really, really big here. And it's kind of a similar deal where there are still some bigger sheep places, but it's kind of died out. But yeah, you don't really see it a whole lot anymore. But that is what I've heard about the sheep industry out west is like, yeah, they run these big flocks, and there's pretty much these guys that are like hermits that don't talk to anyone all summer, and
Yep.
just you live with the flock.
Yeah.
But I mean, holy cow, that's I mean, there's a lot of predator pressure here for sheep. I can't imagine how busy those guys must be trying to keep coyotes and stuff away.
Yeah, they are. They have government trappers and that are. I mean, that's basically what they do full time to try to keep things half controlled.
Yeah.
But yeah, they have a lot more problems than we do for sure.
Yeah. Did they talk about what was the reason for the decline of sheep?
I honestly don't know. I don't know if people just got tired of it, like each generation. I don't know. I honestly can't answer that. I'm gonna have to dig into that a little bit more. I don't know why that happened. I do know there was a period where, and I don't know what year or era it was, but I think it got to the point to where wool wasn't worth anything. The people started wearing a lot more synthetics, and I think that might have had something to do with it. Yeah. And then like a lot of the bigger places would try to go, okay, well, let's do half sheep and half cows. And then eventually they kind of just went to straight cows. And yeah. And I honestly, I can't fully answer that. I know wool prices had something to do with it. And the rest of it, I'm going to have to dig into and get back to you on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have a full understanding either. I know one of the biggest things that I've heard at least around here was when Australia stopped subsidizing their wool industry. It kind of globally made the price of wool just hit rock bottom, basically, because I think they were subsidizing and stockpiling. And then when they decided to release their stockpiles of wool, I've heard some people say that it got to a point where, you could not shear another sheep for 2 years, and you'd still have enough wool to supply the whole world. Like that's how much wool they had.
And that would make sense.
Yeah. And I don't know the whole story. I do think it's really interesting though, because I know, like where I'm at, you can drive around still, especially in the more rural counties, and you can still see everyone's pens set up from when sheep were really big around here.
Right.
And yeah, now pretty much everyone's doing cattle, or goats are starting to come back a little bit. There's money in goats apparently, but yeah, that's cool that they still run those big flocks up there.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's I like seeing, and most of the time you run into them, and it's a lot of sign language and pointing, and I don't have a clue what they're saying, and they don't have but it's still neat. You can kind of sort of figure it out, and still kind of have a conversation with them, and it's just fun being around those guys. They're great people.
Are they ever surprised to see you? Because, like you said, they're up there all summer with just a bunch of
Oh yeah,
sheep
yeah.
and stuff, and then all of a sudden, this blonde on like this big draft cross horse just rides out of the woods.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
sure they're like, "What? Like,
yeah. They're
where
like
am I?"
grinning and pointing, and I ask them, "Can I take your picture?" You know, and I'm doing the hand signals and that, and they love their picture taken. That oh yeah, they
Oh wow.
smile and yeah,
That's
it's
funny.
fun. They get excited and happy, and I'm sure they'll talk to each other and joke, and then start laughing, and I don't have a clue, and I don't think anyway. I just whatever. But yeah,
And then they go start
they
carving on more trees.
yeah, me. I don't know what they do, but anyway, but no, they're all pretty good guys, and they're fun to kind of just watch, and yeah, it's just like I said, it's kind of takes you back to the old days in a way. They're out there horseback or afoot herding sheep in the mountains and living in an old tent, and
Yeah,
it's just pretty a simple life.
yeah. Well, so with that whole deal, and you're up there, I'm sure you probably know everybody, and for the most part, you get along. But at least in the beginning, was that kind of tough for you? Because it's like not only your herd you got to look after, like you know, in my experience, finding 5 to 6 ranchers that are like on board with all the same management practices for their herd, that's not an easy feat.
Right.
So, like, do you run into that where it's like, okay, now I'm gonna do this, and then you have some like backseat drivers maybe or something like that?
Actually, no. For there's some allotments that are near me that they have some issues for sure, but on our deal we don't. We all get along really well. We kind of know the rotation of the cattle and that, and they just say go do it and call us this fall when it's time to gather. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's we all get along really great bunch of guys. But yeah, there are definitely some allotments near here that have a lot of fighting and disagreeing, and like you said, backseat driving or too many chiefs, not enough Indians type thing. Just
Yeah.
there's definitely those issues, but we're pretty lucky, and
Yep.
everybody here gets along pretty well, and yeah, just go do your
Well,
work and
and I'd imagine that demonstrates that they trust you too. That if they're comfortable with you being responsible for all
yeah,
that.
I guess they haven't fired me yet, so we'll
Well,
see.
that's
But
a good sign. That's a good sign. I'll brag on you. I know you're probably not apt to, but I'll brag on you. That's a good sign
yeah,
if no one said anything yet.
yeah, not yet anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know I've got a final question for you.
Okay.
And don't spill your secrets now, if it is a secret. But
Okay.
you're the photographer, but
Yeah.
you've got a lot of photos and you're in the shot. So do you have
Yep.
somebody that helps you with that?
So my dad will on occasion, but the majority I just have a tripod and like a timer. So if I have to do something specifically like for a brand, um, he he helps and he's pretty dang good most of the time. But a lot of times it's hard for me to explain like an angle that I'm looking for or something. So the tripod and a timer works pretty easy. And a lot of times, I have to do several takes because it'll be blurry or I'll only have one leg in it or I got my tongue stuck out or something stupid, But yeah, that's how I do it. And it's not a secret. A blonde like me can figure it out. Anybody.
So when you do that with the timer, do you have your camera set to take multiple shots? Or are you doing
Yeah.
one shot
Yep.
and resetting in
No,
one
I
shot?
can do a bunch, and then that way, I might get one or two good ones out of 10 or 20 or whatever
Okay.
I've got. So, yep.
Cool. That's cool.
So,
That's
yeah,
great. Yeah, well, it's
not
clearly
too
paid off.
complicated.
And even your dad. I mean, I think you almost have to share maybe like 25,000 of your followers with your dad because he
Oh
technically
yeah,
is the photographer, right? I mean,
yep, exactly. I tell him that all the time. Like, yeah, you're famous, and I give him credit. If he takes one, I'll put Ken took this one or whatever. So.
what does he think about all that?
Oh, there's a lot. He jokes about it. So, like, and on my Instagram, most of my pictures are just with my iPhone because that's what I have with me all the time. It's a pain in the butt to pack a camera, but anyway, if we're doing something, I'm like, hey, can you take a picture? And he'll take a few, and then I'll look at him. And his joke is, let me guess, one more. I'm like, yeah, you didn't get it. We got to redo this, So he's used to it, but he jokes and he's a good sport, and yeah, anyway, it works.
Yeah,
That's
awesome.
pretty cool. I'm sure he is.
Yeah. Well, Skye, I think before we let you go, you have to agree that you'll come back on and do another episode with us sometime, because I feel like we have only kind of scratched the surface of this whole deal.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I will, but
Yeah. Well,
I'm not that neat. I don't have. I don't know what else you want me to say. So, but yeah.
Well, I have to say, for a self-proclaimed introvert, you're an excellent conversationalist. You're very well spoken, very interesting. So,
well, I
believe you're an introvert.
Better. I am, but I can fake it till I make it type thing, and one-on-one things I do a lot better. Big groups I'm not so great at, but I am getting better, and obviously to be in business and that I have to force myself to get out of my comfort zone. So I'm working on it.
Yeah.
Well, you do a good job, like you do with your photos, sharing your part of the world with the rest of us. And
well, thanks, you guys, and thanks for having me on and listen to me yap and take up your time here. Hopefully, it wasn't boring for all your listeners. But yeah, I appreciate it, and it's really cool what you guys are doing. So,
yeah,
thank you.
Well, the beauty of this is kind of like we were talking about with your Instagram. If it was boring for them, we don't really care either way, because it's
right. Yeah, they can listen or not, right?
Yeah, we talk to the people we want to talk to. We publish the conversations we want to publish.
Right.
And then everything else, we want to do a good job and be professional, but we don't do it trying to think about the numbers, or
right.
That's not how we gauge success. So
yeah,
it's been pretty cool. Well, Skye, one more time. So if people want to get a hold of you, as in get you, out there taking pictures for them, or, there's some brand ambassador who wants to get a hold of you now, go ahead and drop your Instagram one more time and tell them the best way to
just
get a hold of you.
Skye Clark Images, and Skye is SKYE. And then my website is skyclarkimages.com. So pretty simple, and yeah.
All righty.
Awesome.
Well, hey, don't hang up when we end this thing.
Okay.